Hello and welcome to High Voltages. I have been asked by many students on how to get started with Internet of Things or how to pursue a career in Internet of Things. To answer all these questions, we have invited a guest to this podcast. We have Jasbir Singh with us today, who has been working on IoT since IoT was called M2M or machine to machine. Having seen the IoT industry since beginning, he has the expertise to provide us a roadmap for Internet of Things career. Jasbir Singh is also the author of Architectural Patterns and Techniques for Developing IoT Solution, which is an excellent resource for someone who would like to deepen their knowledge for IoT. He explains the different concepts, architectural patterns, which helps you build IoT applications. This book has helped me understand many new patterns and I will recommend it to anyone in the IoT field. And I know him from this book. So let's welcome our guest and ask him how someone can pursue a career in Internet of Things, what are the skills required, and what are different roles in IoT. This podcast is a roadmap to IoT careers. Thank you, Jasbir, for joining. Firstly, I would like to mention that I have learned a lot from your book, and it was because of your book I have invited you on this podcast so I can ask you more questions and I can let my audience learn more from you.
Thanks, Asin. Thanks for your kind words. And it is pleasure having been invited to this conversation. I really look forward to having a very engaging conversation. Thank you.
So we can start with a very basic question. What is IoT or Internet of Things in very simple words?
Yeah. So, although you asked it simply, but the answer might not be that simple. But I try to simplify as much as possible. So, in a nutshell, what we intend to do is capture the data from machines or equipment and analyze it. And analysis can be for multiple purposes. Right? For example, we want to know the status of a machine. So let's consider a very simple IoT system. A system with this kind of a temperature sensor, and it is monitoring temperature of a room, for example. Okay. So, in a typical scenario, what will happen is that there's a temperature sensor, and we will go and see what is the reading there. Okay, that's a manual way of doing it. So in case we want to automate it, what we would like to do is that the data is automatically starts flowing it in some device. Okay, for example, our mobile device. So that now instead of we going there and then looking at it manually, okay, all the data is coming in automated fashion to our mobile device. So this is one example of a very simple IoT system. We are capturing the data, and there is no need of a manual intervention. Automatically, it is flowing into our device. And then we can take a look whenever we feel like. And we can also further kind of put some logic there. For example, right, we are not interested in all the temperatures, right? We are only interested in, let's say, that if the temperature goes above 40 or if it's below 18. Okay, then we can set rules there that, okay, in the mobile device, I should get a notification only in case the temperature is outside the defined range, meaning either it's less than, let's say 20 degree or more than 40 degree. So we can configure those rules, and then automatically the notification will only come when there's kind of this temperature variance is there, and the variance is outside the permissible limit. So if you see in a way, right, so we have kind of streamlined and made the data capture and visualization in a completely automated fashion. Compared to the manual thing, right, where a person has to go, let's say, after every half an hour or 1 hour, check the temperature and see whether it's beyond limit or not. We've automated everything. So this is an example of a very simple IoT system.
So it's all about data and automation. So could you please tell us something about your IoT journey? How did you get into this field and how was the journey?
So before IoT, right, so I started my career in the device side. I was an embedded engineer. I used to write firmware for different embedded systems. For example, car navigation system, karaoke system, lot of other embedded devices. And that's how the kind of my initial career started. I was also involved in a lot in writing the printer drivers, drivers for printer scanners and so forth. So that was my initial career, and that lasted for around 4 or 5 years. So that was just the start of my career. And it so happened that in the year of 2013 or 14, when this emblem thing was just kind of getting recognized, and it was kind of people were seeing that it has a lot of potential. And that point only, I also got an interest in cloud technologies also. Okay, so and then I realized, kind of a realization came to me that since I have a very strong background in the device side by virtue of spending a couple of years in the embedded side, and if I can learn cloud technology also, if you combine device and cloud, it is kind of very well suited for creating IoT solutions. So I kind of, since I already had that knowledge of device, I started learning what cloud technology, specifically AWS technology. And then I realized that, okay, now I kind of have a perspective of both the sides. On one side is embedded side or a device side. Other side it's a cloud thing. So since I had a fair understanding of both, I then started going more into the IoT domain. And what are the nuances and what are the commonality across the different domains? That really kind of interested me. And my first project in IoT space was home automation project, where we kind of developed a home automation gateway. So that was my first project there, and it really interested me. Although it was not it was kind of a standalone system that the data was not going to cloud, but that gave me good perspective at what type of technologies are there, what are sensors, actuators, what are the considerations, what are the battery power considerations that we need to keep in mind while designing IoT solutions. How different protocols are very well suited for battery consumption. For example, Zigbee protocol. So that was my first project, and then after there was a series of IoT projects and solution I brought up.
So you mentioned the cloud, embedded system, networking, IoT protocols. So I would like to ask, what are the key components of an IoT system, and how hardware, software, and network components combine together to build an IoT system?
Sure. So it's kind of as we all start with what we call as the IoT stack. You see, there are different layers of IoT stack, starting from the bottom. Bottom is obviously our device layer, where we have all those temperatures and different type of sensors. And then those sensors, as I talked about, I gave example of temperature sensor earlier. So in case we want to send the data to cloud, for example, so the temperature sensor won't have that ability, right? Because its main function is to just measure the temperature and report that temperature. So there has to be some intelligence and some connectivity which can transport the current temperature reading to the backend. Backend can be cloud or it can be on-prem system also. For that, we need some additional equipment, which is typically a gateway. So what gateway does is, gateway on one side kind of communicates with these different sensors. It can be temperature sensor, humidity sensor, noise sensor, all type of sensors. So it kind of gathers the data from these devices, which are not that intelligent. They are not don't have that compute power also, because their main function is something different, right? Their main function is sensing only. So gateway kind of interacts with these devices, these sensors, take the data from these sensors and devices, either kind of aggregates it or sends the data as it is to the backend. So essentially what we can see is gateway is kind of an intermediary entity. On one side, it is talking with these sensors. On other side, it's pushing that data to a backend, which can be cloud. Okay. So in case since it needs to connect to the cloud, it also needs to have that connectivity mechanism. Okay. And there can be multiple, connectivity mechanisms. For example, in fact, if you see, our mobile device is a very good example of a gateway. Okay, so it has a lot of sensors, and it also connects to internet also. Okay, so this is the best example which we do use in our everyday life. So, as I was saying, that gateway in one side is talking to these sensors, on the other side it is talking to the backend or a cloud devices, and it can be multiple connectivity protocols. Wi-Fi is one, cellular is another, 4G, 5G, LoRa, so on and so forth. But if you keep this, mobile as a kind of example, this gives a lot of good perspective, because it has a lot of inbuilt sensors. It can connect to the backend, and it do send the data, right? You might have seen that, all our health data, our sleep patterns, that is continuously being pushed to the cloud. So this is the best example I can give you for a gateway.
So again, there are many things that makes up the IoT system. So being a student, so for example, if someone wants to get into the Internet of Things career, or he would like to start learning IoT, so what would you advise him to do? I mean, what are the core skills needed for successful IoT career?
So it all depends on the person's interest also. Okay, because in my career into this IoT journey, I've seen people who are, some people are very kind of expert on the device side, on the embedded side. They were not that much interested on the cloud side. Okay, and then also few of my colleagues were creating, backend systems on the cloud. They were not that much interested, or they didn't have that inclination to learn more about the device functionality. So essentially we can say that IoT constitutes of three main parts: device, connectivity, and backend or cloud. So depending on person's interest, he or she can pick any one of these, different layers. Or in case our person wants to be a full-fledged, I'll say, IoT architect, he or she need to understand the complete story from the sensor to cloud.
So yeah, this was my next question. I mean, either he has to be a specialist in all the fields, or he can be a generalist in for a successful IoT career.
That's correct, right? So it all depends on person's interest. Let's say if a person is very much interested in embedded domain, right? He's interested in creating sensors, actuators. Yeah, and that has its own demand in the industry, because we keep on refining the sensors, we keep on refining the battery characteristics, power consumption, so on and so forth. So it is a kind of a field in itself. But in case a person wants to design a solution at a slightly higher level, at the I know at IoT solution level, then he or she need not go too much deep into a specific technology, but at least from awareness standpoint, he or she should be aware what are the different technology choices that are available.
And also IoT has has a business layer as well. So how important are the soft skills or business skills in and problem solving skills for IoT projects?
I think the problem solving skills, I believe in, is kind of required for any IoT solution, not a IoT solution, for any software solution or in any IT solution. Because we always need to kind of create something new. There's a little bit of a research and development or R&D required for any, even a simple solution. When, let's say, we want to create a small fragment of code, still some analysis would be required. So let's say a general aptitude, programming aptitude, technical aptitude, and problem solving, it would be required, in any case we feel. But answering your specific question, in case we talk about the very high level, the application level. So there, I believe, it also depends on the domain for which we are creating a solution. Let's say we are creating IoT solution for retail. Okay, some understanding of the retail domain would definitely be required, especially at the application level, because otherwise it will be very difficult to understand the type of workflows that are involved, type of processes that are involved, because ultimately we're automating processes. So So we need to have that understanding that, okay, in a normal way or in a manual fashion, what are the processes, what are the different entities that are involved, how they interact with each other. And then we can probably think what of automating, what part can be automated, what needs to be left as it is. It's not that we have to automate everything, because there's a cost and benefit analysis that here. So I'll say specifically to answer your question, and the application here, in addition to technology, some element of domain knowledge would also be quite useful.
So doesn't that make IoT difficult? I mean, you have to be updated with so many things. I mean,
no, as I said, right, so we need not we can always go in a piecemeal manner. Okay, maybe focus on one area, this is focus on device. When we spend maybe 6 months, 1 year, 2 years there, when we're comfortable, then we can probably pick another domain, let's say connectivity, and get a good hang of that piece. Then maybe transition to, let's say, cloud or backend. It can be, stepwise approach as well. You need not, but in case you have to take everything in one go, obviously it will be complex. It's not complex, but it is kind of, on the number of technology choices that are there. That makes it a little bit, difficult.
mhm. Okay. So now let's talk about the IoT roles. So could you please share us some IoT roles that are, I mean, from the industry? For example, we have the IoT backend engineers and IoT solution architect, IoT product owner, and IoT consultant. So what are these roles, and what are the responsibilities of these roles? And if someone is, for example, starting out, so I mean, how he can start and what is the progression like?
There are different roles, right? For example, one is the business analyst. I'll start with the business analyst role, where, the expectation is that the person would have obviously some domain knowledge, and he or she should be able to understand customers' requirement, document them properly. Okay, so the solution is kind of created as per customer's expectation. It's not that we can create any solution. Ultimately, the solution should meet customers' objective, business objective. There, business analyst role becomes very crucial. Then we have a technical architect and solution architect. So this is kind of a slight difference between technical architect and solution architect, although sometimes these terms are used interchangeably also. So technical architect, in my view, is the person who has more deep understanding of one specific part, one specific layer of, let's say, IoT stack. As we discussed earlier, a person can be focused on device side, only embedded side of the. A person can be connectivity specialist, or a person can be cloud specialist. So typically that, in this industry parlance, those people are typically categorized in the technical architect bucket. Solution architect is typically a slightly senior person, can devise the solution end to end, who has some industry knowledge, some domain knowledge, good experience, and he can kind of create end to end solution. So that's a solution architect role. Then another role which is very important is our program manager or technical program manager roles. A person who needs to kind of understand what are the resource requirements, what are the schedule commitments, how to adhere to that, what type of resources are required. In fact, in IoT solutions, program management becomes a very important function. The reason being, there's sort of conversations or negotiations that are required with the device vendors also. And because in most probably no company would kind of develop the complete solution, hardware, software, everything in-house. They need to kind of outsource from outside. So there is a negotiation, discussions, right? Sourcing from different vendors, comparing their products. So program manager becomes a very crucial role in that environment. Program manager is the person who kind of combines the whole show. So that's a program manager. Then we have developers, right? People who actually code Be it, on the device side, they create a solution or they create a functionality on the gateway, for example. Okay. Or it can be cloud, application architects also. And then we can further categorize developers into two. Further, we can categorize them. One is, let's say, backend developers, another is front-end developers. So, persons who are who have expertise in developing visualizations and dashboards, they are typically front-end developers. Another role, which is, which may sound very similar to front-end developer, but is very different role, that is for the UX designers, user experience designers. So those are the people who will understand the customer requirements, who will understand the requirements from business analyst also, and create different visualizations. That this is the right setup on dashboarding. This element, this widget should go here. This widget is not important, or this should be highlighted first. So that's the role of a UX designer. That's also very interesting. Obviously, in any solution, we need to do the verification and validation. So we do have a good requirement of IoT engineers also. And, as we started our discussion, that IoT solution is typically different from normal software solutions, because you need to have that, understanding of both the sides, the device side and the application side. So IoT engineer becomes a very important role, who can kind of understand the nuances of both the sides, who can kind of validate solution as per customer requirements. So, essentially, what I'm trying to say is that obviously the prior experience would help, but starting IoT journey, if someone is interested, he or she should start as soon as possible, so that he can start understanding the nuances that are involved in IoT solutions.
So you mentioned some roles that requires experience, such as solution architect is a very experienced person, and technical architect also require the experience of his domain. So, for example, if someone is just got graduated and he would like to start his IoT career, so what are his options? What are his options he can start with?
Typically, people who are just out of college, they typically either start in the development side, okay, as a developer, front-end developer, back-end developer, or test engineer, or business analyst. So typically, these are the roles which are typically starting. They opt in as part of their initial career. And then once they get accustomed, they gain experience, they can graduate to technical architect, solution architect, so on and so forth.
Okay. And how do you see the IoT market evolving in the next few years with the generative AI and everything that is coming along the way? So how do you see the IoT?
The IoT, I think, is kind of is already a booming industry, and it will continue to boom in the coming years as well. And as you mentioned, very good point about other technologies, for example, Gen AI. So what I feel, it's my personal view, and that's what I mentioned in my book also, that IoT in itself is a very powerful technology. Using this, we can create a very innovative solutions. And in different domains, it can be automotive, it can be retail, it can be agriculture, manufacturing. So lot of innovative solutions we can create, only if we consider IoT. But if we combine IoT with other technologies, as you mentioned, generative AI or Web3 or Metaverse, then the solution become even more richer, more innovative, more wide in scope. So I'll say those technology will only augment the scope of IoT solutions. They'll make it even more powerful. In fact, in my book, you mentioned about my book. In my book, there is one chapter which specifically talks about this thing, that how IoT can be combined with other upcoming technologies, so that we can have even more, innovative solutions.
Yes, I have read that chapter and I found that very interesting. It was, you mentioned the AR, VR technologies as well, and you mentioned some other technologies as well.
Yeah, that was the intent. So the idea was that people shouldn't get, limited in their thinking that, IoT is kind of a closed thing. Okay. So we need to always think that what is the problem and how because technology is just to solve a problem. So if IoT can itself solve the problem, well and good. But if we can augment IoT with other technology and that can result in an effective solution, then we should definitely go for it.
So I may be wrong, but this is my understanding. You may correct me that IoT systems can help us collect data and we can utilize that data. I mean, using different other, for example, we can use generative AI to utilize that data.
Exactly. Very right. Very right. So IoT is, as you said, right, is primarily involved in gathering data, making sense of that data. Then it can be complemented with other technologies. For example, blockchain, right? Blockchain is essentially put for providing more security to IoT data that is getting transition from one place to another place. All these new technologies are complementary also.
So now we can discuss about how someone can transition into IoT. For example, when it comes to IoT, it doesn't matter if you have graduated with computer science. Some I even have seen some people from physics background into IoT, and some mostly have the electronics or electrical or telecom experience. So, for example, how computer scientists or physicists can get into the IoT fields?
So I'd say definitely, all the streams are most welcome, and they do have, a lot of interesting things to look forward to when they start their career in IoT. But having some, I'll say, programming knowledge or some computer science knowledge will definitely help. But you are very right that, let's say, a person is having a electronics knowledge or a telecommunication knowledge, then that person can be a very fit for, let's say, connectivity related work, okay, where we are optimizing that pipe, data pipe. Let's say maybe when we are kind of thinking about whether 5G is the right technology or 4G is the right technology. So they obviously, those people also and kind of play a very vital role there. Similarly for the physicists as well.
So we are almost at the end of this podcast. So I would like to ask you, what advice would you give to someone interested in starting a career in IoT?
So I'd say pick your interest area and then go from there. It's a very interesting field, a very innovative field, and the sky is the limit. And if you see in my book also, I've kind of captured many kind of given a very good examples of how the solutions can be developed using IoT. Please read this book also if you get a chance. And a lot of information is available in public domain also, so you can access that. A lot of YouTube tutorials are there. That's also a good reference point. And feel free to reach out to me as well.
Okay, so I will put the link of this book and your LinkedIn account in the description. And finally, your book has been an excellent resource. It has helped me look at IoT from a different perspective. And so apart from this resource, which is an excellent resource, what other resources you would advise to learn IoT, or is there anything that you follow to stay updated on the IoT?
So typically it's the information that is available in the public domain, Googling, day in, day out, that increases knowledge. Taking some courses on, those online tutorials, that also helps a lot. And good thing is that there's a lot of information that is freely available in IoT. And there's good amount of reference that is made available by AWS also, Azure also. People can go to those as well. And both AWS and Azure, they also give sort of reference architectures also, IoT reference architectures, which can be a very good reference point for understanding that how a particular solution can be created, how a solution for, let's say, agriculture can be created, how a solution for manufacturing can be created. So those are very good, excellent, I'll say, references.
Yes, that sounds really good, and I'm surely going to check all these resources. And so thank you, Jasbir, for joining us. And I will put the link of your book and your LinkedIn account in the description. So if anyone would like to connect with him, he can connect on LinkedIn, and also do check out the book. It is really interesting, and I would recommend it to anyone in the IoT field.
Thanks, Asim. It was a pleasure talking to you today.